Nancy's DNA, it makes it an especially compelling DNA sample, right? If they are mixed. And we see that a lot with suspects and victims, that there is mixed blood or mixed other type of biological material.
NY's genetic markers turn this into a remarkably intriguing piece of evidence, wouldn't you say? We frequently encounter blended samples between persons of interest and those they target, whether it involves fluid or other physical traces. This whole inquiry hinges on a single digit. We are not talking about a name, a date, or a tally of the days since Nancy Guthrie vanished into the night. Instead, it represents a specific proportion of genetic evidence currently being analyzed at a Florida facility. Detectives are convinced this physical trace belongs to the intruder who breached the house, forced an 84-year-old woman to leave, and remains completely unknown after more than 66 days. Both federal agents and the foremost genetic tracking expert on the planet possess this critical metric. But her latest statement regarding the matter is the absolute last thing anyone was hoping for. Stick around as you are already familiar with the foundation of this mystery. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, whose daughter is morning television host Savannah Guthrie, vanished from her Catalina Foothills residence right around 9:45 on the evening of January 31st following a family meal. After getting a ride back, she walked through her front door and disappeared without a trace. Authorities discovered fluid on the front steps that matched New York's profile, while the rear entrances were discovered wedged ajar. The connection to her heart monitor severed at exactly 2:28 on the morning of February 1st, though her security lens had already blacked out at 1:47. In the very early hours of Sunday, precisely at 1:47 a.m., the front porch surveillance cuts out. Roughly 25 minutes later, at 2:12 a.m., the digital system picks up a human figure on the feed. Within the residence, detectives uncovered physical evidence completely out of place, distinctly different from New York's fluid found outside. They located an interior genetic deposit from a total stranger, a profile that failed to align with anybody in Nancy Guthrie's inner circle. It ruled out relatives, domestic workers, and absolutely anyone possessing a legitimate excuse to leave a physical footprint on the property. Sheriff Nanos officially verified this detail on February 19th. Just recently, Chris Nanos announced that his team is leveraging advanced ancestry databases to hunt down potential profile hits regarding the Nancy Guthrie mystery. The moment this update hit the scientific investigation circles, everyone reacted with the exact same level of urgency. Veteran tracking experts all echoed identical sentiments. Holding the intruder's physical trace means this puzzle can easily be unraveled. We are not talking about 10 years down the line, but rather very shortly, since the vast records and cutting-edge tech are already fully operational. This exact strategy has cracked an endless string of mysteries. You just process the evidence quickly and a suspect emerges. C.C. Moore heads up the Ancestry Division over at Parabon Nanolabs. Relying solely on genetic markers and family tree systems, she has personally cracked well over 300 previously frozen investigations. She initially spoke out before the true complexity of the situation came to light. She noted that if she were the perpetrator, panic would definitely be setting in as modern ancestry tracking guarantees an eventual unmasking. She explained that assuming the person of interest holds extensive family history within the United States, a lineage stretching back multiple generations domestically could mean pinning down their identity in merely a few hours or even less. The expert admitted to holding out hope for precisely this style of breakthrough regarding the Guthrie mystery, though those comments were made back in February. Come February 20th, the entire mood shifted when Nanos stepped back in front of the press and dropped one specific term that completely derailed the scientific approach. He explained that genetic profiles sometimes blend together, revealing that the evidence gathered on site actually contained multiple overlapping signatures. Therefore, technicians must untangle the strands, ideally preserving enough leftover material just in case legal teams eventually request their own testing. The physical trace pulled from NY's residence turned out to be far from a pristine solo marker. It was a tangled composite. Several individuals' physical signatures were mashed together in one spot, transforming a massive win into a complicated organic riddle that Nanos admitted could require months to unravel. Science professionals absorbed that briefing and instantly asked one thing: exactly how convoluted is this blended evidence? When the clarification finally surfaced, it carried far more weight than any previous public statement. C.C. Moore openly stated that her initial reaction to learning about the blended Guthrie evidence was far from panicked, since combined profiles frequently appear after intense physical altercations, inevitably leaving behind more than just one person's organic footprint. For ancestry-based detectives, the core issue rarely hinges purely on whether a swab contains multiple contributors. The real issue lies entirely within the specific composition of that blend. A standard dual profile where the targeted individual provides the dominant share and the intruder leaves a smaller trace is a familiar hurdle that facilities easily navigate. Data specialists can absolutely process it. It just eats up more time. In fact, Moore believes these layered traces might actually provide a unique upper hand. Finding a distinct secondary signature from an individual who has zero logical reason to be in that environment practically glows against the primary resident's organic backdrop, acting just like a neon sign pointing straight toward the person responsible. She noted we face a heavily tangled blend pointing to a minimum of 2 unidentified people. This is far from your standard run-of-the-mill sample. We have NY's genetics material alongside an unidentified guy. There will clearly be several mysterious contributors mixed into that specific batch. Weeks slowly turned into a full month while the Florida-based facility DNA Labs International worked on it. Nanos hand-picked this private testing center instead of using the FBI's dedicated hub in Quantico. They processed the evidence, yet nothing came back. 0 profiles, 0 connections, and absolutely 0 family clues for the eager detectives. Moore watched the calendar, realizing the ongoing quiet meant something else. She previously saw tangled blends sorted out in mere days. In the past, she witnessed facilities pull family clues from tough batches under 7 days. This particular situation lacked any clear schedule. Once Nanos mentioned the facility predicted answers might require 12 months, Moore shared what that massive delay actually signified. His statement strongly hinted at a deeper issue, basically hoping future technological breakthroughs might eventually save the day. That essentially proves their efforts completely failed when relying on the digital tools currently available on the open market, as well as the bioinformatics experts trying to grasp the exact hurdles detectives are currently battling throughout this mystery. To truly grasp the situation, you must accurately comprehend the inner workings of forensic family tree tracing and its core requirements. We are absolutely not discussing CODIS here. That combined DNA index system serves as a federal catalog logging genetic markers from individuals with past legal troubles. That registry holds almost 20 million flagged files. Uploading an unidentified swab basically gives a quick yes or no connection. The Guthrie evidence already ran through that exact system. Nothing popped up. The person dropping that biological trace inside NY's residence lacks any major legal history within the national network. Standard police archives simply will not crack this particular mystery open. Forensic family tracing operates on a completely unique concept, demanding a drastically different kind of genetic blueprint to succeed. Rather than checking existing bad actor catalogs, these specialized researchers build something known as an SNP blueprint. That stands for a single nucleotide polymorphism setup. Consider this comparison if a standard CODIS file acts like a basic pencil drawing, just detailed enough to verify someone you already have detained in the holding room. An SNP framework serves as a highly detailed roadmap of biological lineage. It reveals their identity, their forefathers, and ultimately their modern relatives. Commercial heritage kits produce this exact type of detailed map. Millions of everyday folks utilize these services, tracking down long-lost cousins, following historical migration routes, uncovering cultural roots, or satisfying curiosity regarding family origins. After securing that detailed SNP map for our mysterious individuals, they upload it to public heritage databases, completely bypassing private law enforcement archives, opting instead for commercial sites where regular users willingly share personal biological histories, making them completely open for discovery. This clever code never hunts for the main target directly. Instead, it seeks out folks sharing genetic ties. Various cousins or distant kin connected through a single great-great-grandparent. Literally anybody registered possessing sufficient matching biological markers pointing toward a shared forefather hidden deep within their lineage. From those hits, researchers construct the lineage piece by piece, mapping every forefather. Detectives link each hit to recognized family members, follow ties through vintage archives, and pinpoint where all distinct lines intersect. Everything points back to one specific figure possessing the correct physical gender and the exact right age bracket, along with the proper location history, making them the absolute most logical fit for that masked figure caught on tape. C.C. Moore explained the concept to CNN as working backward to build a person's identity using strictly their biological code. Essentially, we decode the unknown actor's heritage step by step, heavily relying upon whichever individuals share their biological markers. Therefore, forefather by forefather, our team perfectly reconstructs their entire familial network. His true identity remains a mystery, yet we possess the power to uncover the exact identities of his genetically linked relatives. Exactly, you never actually need the target to hand over a personal swab. You merely need enough extended family members voluntarily uploading their own kits. This exact method unmasked Joseph James D'Angelo as the Golden State Killer, a notorious repeat offender dodging police capture for over 40 years. It also pointed detectives straight toward Brian Koberger during the tragic Idaho case tracking a heritage path sparked by a distant cousin's commercial kit. This tactic remains highly verified, legally sound, and incredibly fast-paced, assuming you have the perfect starting conditions. However, launching this process demands one crucial cornerstone. You must secure a pristine, workable SNP blueprint. Submitting a messy blend fails entirely. Uploading random biological noise gets you nowhere. You absolutely cannot expect a heritage platform to track down kin from a scrambled signal buried beneath overlapping profiles. First up is deconvolution, that highly technical method of untangling blended evidence into distinct, clear genetic blueprints must take priority. This step must work flawlessly, yielding enough essential markers to actually find useful family ties within public systems. Should this extraction fall flat, everything halts. Researchers get absolutely nothing to submit. Those digital archives remain unsearched. No family branches get mapped out, and identifying the culprit becomes impossible. Then comes the accessibility hurdle, a massive issue that mainstream television reports almost completely gloss over. Ancestry, DNA, 23, and Me and My Heritage. The globe's top 3 commercial platforms collectively boast over 50 million files. Yet every single one strictly blocks police agencies from tapping into their records. They drew a hard moral and corporate line, ensuring client biology stays entirely out of police casework. Moore explained to CNN that forcing entry even armed with a judge's order sparks an absolute legal war. Backed by massive budgets and dedicated lawyers, these companies fiercely defend consumer privacy, making forced entries agonizingly sluggish. Authorities are basically limited to GED match. Family Tree DNA, along with Moore's personal site, DNA Justice. Combined, they contain under 2 million records. 50 million against 2 million, those are the daunting odds detectives face. Most of that commercial biological material, which might hypothetically assist in tracking down the perpetrator, is locked securely out of police reach. Meanwhile, the tiny pool they are allowed to scan is far too small to make this strategy consistently effective across diverse demographics. Toss another complication into the mix. That available space of barely 2 million files lacks massive diversity. Multi-generational Americans descending from Northwestern Europe dominate these systems entirely, leaving newly arrived citizens, individuals tracing their roots back to Latin America, Southeast Asia, or Africa, alongside anyone who skipped the at-home genetics craze altogether, completely off the radar. These groups and their kin usually vanish from these searches, boiling everything down to a dual reality. Can the evidence yield a pristine read? And do the perpetrator's family members actually belong to that 2 million member club allowing police access? Both requirements absolutely must align for this investigative lineage tactic to bear fruit. Highly regarded genetics expert Colleen Fitzpatrick discussed this with NBC News shortly after NY vanished. She wasn't leaking classified details or sharing secret conversations from lead detectives. She merely did what brilliant minds do, translating a deeply complicated scenario into everyday language. Ancestral tracking works wonders with tiny or damaged biological traces, yet fails miserably when things get blended. The main culprit must stand out as the primary source, undeniably so, like a clear 90 to 10% split. At first glance, that feels totally manageable. The perpetrator's trace sits right there in the mix. Fitzpatrick noted that experts have successfully navigated a 90 to 10 distribution inside a straightforward dual-source blend. Assuming biological material actually exists, it will definitely be blended, mostly overpowered by Guthrie's markers. Untangling these combinations using CODIS, or standard ancestral techniques, proves incredibly tough, even though programs have cracked comparable proportions within less complicated evidence. However, she quickly dropped a massive caveat that flips the whole script. Does that tiny 10% fraction hold enough volume and clarity to produce the necessary markers for a solid profile? Finding it isn't enough. The real test is capturing enough pristine data to submit online and actually pull workable family connections for the experts. That remains the absolute make-or-break hurdle here. Fitzpatrick left zero room for doubt. A 10% background trace might completely fail that standard. Those indicators could show up, but lack volume. The read might be there, just way too weak and shattered to use. Lacking vital data points means an unfinished blueprint, completely locking investigators out of those ancestry archives. Zero system access stops the family tree cold, which ultimately means the culprit stays totally nameless. Next, she brought up another factor, the exact piece turning a tough job into a literal brick wall. What if this blend involves more than two people? Sheriff Nanos never specifically called it a dual source sample. He explicitly phrased it as multiple biological sources combined. He confirmed the crime scene evidence was heavily blended. So they desperately need to pull it apart. Hopefully technicians can untangle it while saving enough material for defense attorneys to eventually analyze. In the world of forensics, those specific words carry heavy weight. It doesn't strictly point to just two people being involved. We could be looking at 3, 4, or even higher. Imagine the actual scene where a brutal attack went down. Think about a home where the target lived for countless years, a place where dozens of different guests walked through over time. Every bit of that organic trace evidence can easily end up mixed together in one tiny swab taken from a single countertop. Breaking down blended DNA profiles relies heavily on complex math and odds. If a swab has trace evidence from exactly two people and the split is obvious, advanced algorithms can map out every single genetic flag to the right person with enough mathematical certainty to build a solid lead. The system naturally spots the primary person's genetic data right away. Whatever genetic data is left over mathematically gets assigned to the secondary person. Throwing a third mystery person into the mix makes the math intensely complicated, forcing the system to divide every single genetic trait across 3 competing statistical paths. Suddenly, the level of certainty for every match drops significantly. The chance of making a critical mistake on any single data point skyrockets. The computer programs struggle massive amounts just to hit the baseline reliability standards needed for ancestral matching or bringing a case to trial. Tossing in a fourth unidentified person doesn't just make it twice as hard. The complication level completely blows up off the charts. Every new person mixed into the sample forces the computer to process an endless mountain of possible DNA combinations to figure out. Which brings us directly to the core issue stalling the entire Guthrie case. The massive data load simply breaks what modern tech can reliably handle. It is not an issue of bad gear or lack of money. And it's definitely not a lack of brainpower. We are hitting a hard mathematical wall where current programming just cannot untangle this kind of messy sample. C.C. Moore verified exactly how brutal this blended sample issue was during several public interviews between February and March of this past year. In professional crime lab terms, she officially labeled the evidence a complex mixture. Being a complex blend guarantees we are dealing with a bare minimum of two completely unidentified people. This is far from your standard clear-cut case of finding the victim's profile alongside one mystery guy. Once the waiting period dragged on far beyond any typical messy sample she had ever seen, even outlasting the timeline for brutal two-person cases, she started piecing the reality together. The harsh truth is that none of the digital tools or brilliant data experts available right now can actually untangle this massive biological puzzle. Right now, investigators are basically crossing their fingers for major tech breakthroughs in the near future. News Nation's Truth of the Matter host Natasha Zvest did not hold back and asked her point blank about the issue. She questioned if it was highly probable that the required tech simply has not been invented yet. Without missing a beat, Moore confirmed the programming is basically non-existent, or at the very least, completely out of reach for both DNA Labs International and the FBI. She tied this incredible roadblock directly to the overall evolution of modern criminal tech. The methods used to untangle old-school STR profiles found in systems like CODIS have been polished and perfected over 30 long years. Those traditional programs are highly advanced, easy to get, and bulletproof in front of a jury. Crime lab experts have spent 3 entire decades grinding through real cases and university studies to make those specific systems flawless. But using SNP data for deep dive family tree investigations is a whole different beast and incredibly new to the scene. The digital process required to turn a messy biological soup into a crystal clear genetic profile for ancestral databases is, as Moore herself put it, basically starting from absolute scratch, mostly because it's still in its infancy compared to the legacy systems experts have relied on for generations. The massive blind spot between those ancient, reliable database programs and today's cutting-edge ancestral tech is exactly the trap the Guthrie case is stuck inside. Moore did emphasize that the scientific methods are constantly leveling up. She highlighted absolutely massive breakthroughs happening over the 7.5 years she has spent dominating this specific industry. She fully admitted that some brilliant mind out there might already be coding the exact program needed to solve this chaotic biological puzzle. She made it crystal clear, stating that it is entirely possible a rogue developer has already built the golden ticket to crack this wide open. The big hope is that this roadblock actually sparks a massive tech revolution, giving fresh tech minds the perfect stage to showcase their secret projects. The extreme spotlight currently shining right on the Guthrie investigation, combined with massive media hype and pressure from top lab experts, might just be the exact spark needed to invent the missing technology. We have definitely seen mega-viral mysteries force massive upgrades in tech history before. Catching the Golden State Killer famously pushed police departments everywhere to aggressively adopt deep-dive ancestral tracing. This exact mystery could rapidly force the creation of the very untangling software we are missing right now, but for today, we are still just waiting. Right now, that genetic material sits down in Florida, still waiting to yield a viable profile. We really need to mention another key behind-the-scenes fact regarding this clue. Nanos deliberately bypassed the FBI's processing offer at Quantico, opting instead to ship the material straight to DNA Labs International. Ex-Surgeon General Richard Carmona openly noted that Quantico boasts the nation's premier taxpayer-funded forensic lab, making it completely free to use. When pressed on the matter, C.C. Moore offered a far more diplomatic response. She pointed out that this private lab handles specialized SNP testing the FBI simply cannot do internally, theoretically saving time by running it alongside traditional CODIS checks. Only time will tell if taking that specific route was actually the smartest move. What remains absolute fact is the evidence's current location, along with everything that hasn't been accomplished over the past 66 days. We are going to share that figure with you, but you need the full picture to grasp its true impact. Without the backstory, that data point is just another random metric. When placed in the proper light, it practically serves as an expert ruling on the single most crucial clue in this whole case. Top forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick broke down the cold, hard math for NBC News. Imagine the sample from NY's residents is split 90 to 10-90% belonging to NY and 10% from a mystery suspect. So, 90% of that biological trace links straight back to the victim who called that place home for decades. That leaves a 10% slice hypothetically tying back to the masked armed intruder who took her into the dark and still walks free. Fitzpatrick warned this split might fall short, making it nearly impossible for technicians to pull enough viable markers from that 10% sliver for proper family tree matching. She also threw out a massive curveball. What happens if we aren't just dealing with two people's DNA, but a whole group? If multiple individuals left tiny fragments, the complication skyrockets far past what today's best tech algorithms can untangle. C.C. Moore backed up this harsh reality, totally agreeing that they are facing an incredibly tough, blended sample. She admitted that hitting the 1-year mark proves our current lab technology simply isn't powerful enough to crack this specific puzzle. Then she dropped the exact bombshell every single person working this mystery dreaded hearing. If every family lineage I trace leads straight back to the immediate vicinity of the incident, I instantly know the suspect is a local with deep community ties, making the hunt significantly tougher since their relatives are everywhere nearby. While that localization could be a massive clue, she didn't just say the process would drag on for ages. She didn't claim it was merely difficult or that technology would eventually catch up, nor did she promise that detectives were close to a breakthrough. She bluntly stated this clue will probably never crack the mystery, a heavy blow coming from an expert who has crushed over 300 cold cases. This is the exact same world-renowned specialist who back in February was thrilled to learn foreign genetic material turned up at the residence. We are talking about the top-tier DNA detective over at Parabon Nanolabs, the literal trailblazer of this science, who has unraveled some of America's most notoriously stubborn unsolved mysteries. She speaks with absolute, undeniable authority, relying on hardcore scientific facts rather than flashy news concepts. Highly doubtful this will end up being the smoking gun. The gravity of that statement is absolutely massive, especially since she isn't just some random talking head. She's no TV pundit giving a hot take. She is genuinely the nation's leading authority on whether a biological clue is actually usable. And she laid it out clearly if the variables match what the current data implies. Investigators might have completely maxed out what modern science can physically squeeze from that household swab. Worse still, the technological roadblock might not clear up in time to actually bring Nancy Guthrie any closure. Let's be crystal clear about the reality here. This absolutely does not mean the entire hunt is being called off. It doesn't imply the feds are out of options, nor does it guarantee the disguised figure caught on the porch, Cam, gets away forever. He could still face a judge and fully pay for terrorizing an 84-year-old woman inside her own sanctuary dead in the night. However, the actual takeaway here is highly specific and undeniably grim. The very item detectives publicly banked their entire scientific strategy on, the genetic trace pulled right from New York's living space, that highly anticipated swab validated by law enforcement back in February might officially be a dead end for today's lab capabilities. Yet C.C. Moore quickly shifted the entire narrative right after admitting the brutal reality of the flawed evidence. Literal moments after breaking down how a tiny trace within a messy sample could totally stump modern technology, she changed her tune completely. She pointed out that Nancy must have been kept at another location. Finding a secondary spot provides a fresh chance to recover genetic clues, and that is definitely not just empty hope. We are not just sugarcoating a grim reality with wishful thinking here. A top forensic expert is mapping out a proven science-backed route that entirely bypasses those previous software glitches. It neatly sidesteps the complicated mixtures and tricky sample ratios currently bottlenecking the investigation. Any spot they took Nancy Guthrie after pulling her from her Catalina Foothills residence instantly becomes an active investigation zone. The getaway car, a backup hideout, or even just a random room all count as critical evidence hotspots. Any building, stretch of road, or area where they kept or moved her could easily harbor the suspect's physical traces. These drops would land in areas completely free from 60 years of Nancy Guthrie's everyday genetic footprint. That exact issue ruined the house swabs, and the scientific reasoning behind it makes perfect sense. Nancy's genetic markers dominate those tests simply because it was her longtime residence, not just from the incident itself. She left traces on literally every surface in that place over countless days of normal life. From tiny nicks, stray hairs on furniture, and morning coffee cups to the very walls she brushed past. Her profile practically coats the property, making it incredibly tough to isolate traces of an unwanted intruder. You are basically trying to spot an outsider's profile hiding behind a massive wall of the victim's own genetics. The intruder hung around for maybe 40 minutes, whereas Nancy lived there for decades. A backup spot totally flips that dynamic, meaning the getaway ride would mostly feature his own genetic markers. Whatever room they stashed her in would mainly carry traces of its previous occupants instead. Detectives could easily rule out those prior tenants, leaving the suspect's traces clear of Nancy Guthrie's 60-year history. They would be analyzing entirely different environments, opening up new laboratory possibilities, exactly as Moore stated on the News Nation podcast. Securing a solid sample from the person who took her means advanced family tree tracking will absolutely expose his identity. I firmly expect a breakthrough to happen using this exact method. She noted there are probably 2 or 3 other primary spots involved since they definitely moved Nancy to another location. Any vehicle or hideout they shared becomes a goldmine for physical evidence, entirely free of those frustrating laboratory hurdles. Moore offered another crucial piece of advice that authorities might have actually overlooked. She pressed detectives to grab fresh swabs at the Guthrie residence, despite the family moving back in and visitors contaminating things. She explained that genetic traces are surprisingly resilient. They stick around on objects way longer than anyone usually guesses. And thanks to modern tech, a single microscopic hair strand can crack the case, specifically referencing the security camera footage. The intruder seemingly kept a tactical flashlight gripped in his teeth. He carried that light in his mouth throughout his 40-minute intrusion, according to Moore's breakdown. He likely did not clench it for the whole 40 minutes, meaning he grabbed it and instantly covered his gloves in saliva. He definitely touched things afterward, and saliva provides some of the absolute best, most pristine genetic profiles available. Any moment he pulled that light away from his face or exhaled past his mask, he dropped physical clues that investigators probably missed during their initial sweep of the property. That evidence is just sitting there for detectives who now understand exactly how the initial science fell short. Moore bluntly stated that genetic material survives incredibly well. Therefore, if authorities failed to secure his profile initially, it is absolutely still hiding in that house, and detectives need to go back since they can simply filter out the relatives' profiles. That suggestion highlights a dark cloud of political drama that has plagued the entire operation since day one. Richard Carmona, a former Pima County Sheriff and U.S. Surgeon General, called out Chris Nanos for committing a massive rookie mistake by clearing the investigation zone before the lead detective finished gathering the forensics. We were all totally baffled watching the news report that he personally released the property. A sheriff never makes that call. The head detective must first ensure every single piece of evidence is properly documented and secured. Once that is done, then they release it, Carmona explained on News Nation, prompting heavy pushback from Nanos. He stood by every call his squad made, totally rejecting claims that the site was mishandled. He actually brushed off the heavy backlash against his leadership as completely silly. The Pima County Board of Supervisors unanimously forced Nanos under oath to explain his track record and departmental leadership. By March 24th, his own agency's Pima County Deputies Organization unanimously hit him with a no-confidence vote. A serious recall campaign is actively gaining momentum today. Fox News Digital and News Nation both verified this via several deep insiders familiar with the agency, revealing the sergeant running the initial Guthrie Major Crimes Squad had zero prior experience leading a fatal investigation. Only a single detective on that starting roster had topped 3 years in major crimes. Naturally, Nanos heavily disputed this, vocally defending his supervisor while pointing to specific closed cases. However, those independent reports from 2 major outlets now firmly cement the official record regarding how this task force was built. These are hard institutional facts, not assumptions about Nancy Guthrie's fate or who takes the blame for any operational failures. They form a thoroughly verified public record showing how the intense spotlight on this massive search actually looks behind closed doors straight from the insiders actively tasked with bringing her safely home. This absolutely matters for the scientific evidence, setting the foundational context for how we judge every single choice regarding sample gathering, site management, and the chosen partner labs. It is April 7th, 2026, exactly 66 days since Nancy Guthrie vanished. Savannah Guthrie hit the Today Show set on April 6th, wearing yellow, casually greeting viewers with breaking overnight Middle East updates. She seamlessly shifted to new peace proposals currently discussed. Stating it was April 6th, she confidently anchored Today, feeling right at home. She later stepped into Rockefeller Center, holding back tears as coworkers and fans surrounded her while her mother was still missing. The search remains heavily active. The Puma County Sheriff's Department completely pivoted, scaling down from the massive 400-person crew they initially deployed, using a highly specialized long-term unit for lingering clues while the Federal Bureau actively sifts through incoming tips. Law enforcement brass publicly promised to relentlessly dig until Nancy Guthrie is recovered or every last clue dries up. That single glove, located exactly 2 miles from her property, initially thought to match the porch cam intruder's gear, actually belonged to a local restaurant worker totally unlinked to the incident. Meanwhile, that complex genetic sample from the residence sits at DNA Labs International in Florida. Fresh demands recently popped up, including messages sent to TMZ claiming Nancy was spotted alive down in Sonora, Mexico. The anonymous sender claimed they knew her exact location and the true identities of her captors. They stressed time was critical last Tuesday. Today, the lab's complex separation process still hasn't yielded results. No viable genetic marker profile exists, yet meaning massive ancestry databases remain entirely untouched. We still lack an identity for the disguised porch figure, yet forensic experts aren't throwing in the towel. Moore was incredibly clear here. Any secondary location holding Nancy could offer pristine biological clues completely free from their current contamination headaches. Doing a fresh re-swab like she suggested might uncover crucial trace elements the first sweeps missed. Plus, the advanced separation software that feels like sci-fi today might become reality within 12 months, potentially making that messy house sample totally viable. Public genetic registries currently sitting under 2 million users could easily explode, especially if the public heeds Moore's plea to grab their raw ancestry data and share it to GED Match or Family Tree DNA. Just one simple file drop from a distant cousin could be the silver bullet, blowing this mystery wide open. Outside high-tech lab work, cases like this always boil down to basic human nature. Somebody out there knows something. This culprit didn't just magically spawn from nowhere only to vanish back into the shadows. They mapped this strike knowing her exact layout habits and neighborhood, securing a tool alongside a highly unique holster, a 25-liter Ozark Trail Walmart backpack, heavy-duty tactical gloves, and a specialized bite grip flashlight. Rocking a full face mask for a grueling 40-minute strike requires intense prep that never stays quiet. Somebody witnessed a detail. Somebody made that transaction. Somebody caught a whisper. The FBI hotline stays completely active. Dial 1-800-CALL-FBI or hit tips.fbi.gov. The local 88 hotline currently offers a $12,000 payout for leads. Milwaukee Crime Stoppers alongside lawyer Michael Hupy pledged an extra $100,000 for any nameless lead pushing this investigation forward without ever needing your identity after 66 days. That specific digit driving this scientific investigation isn't the single statistic carrying weight here. We must also consider the amount of silent witnesses holding onto secrets without reaching out. Think about the unswabbed textures inside that residence, along with those hidden secondary scenes remaining completely off the radar. Consider the amount of genetic registry files potentially linking directly to an unknown subject's relatives. When crowds share their heritage data, endless resolutions become reality, provided that crucial detail lands on the proper detective's desk exactly when needed. that genetic material recovered from NY's residents might eventually become the massive turning point detectives desperately need. Assuming technological capabilities evolve and advanced analytical programs are successfully created, perhaps that material gets tested again, though there are absolutely no guarantees. Top industry professionals candidly admit that given today's scientific boundaries, this particular swab by itself probably will not be the smoking gun solving this mystery. However, this inquiry hasn't exhausted all its clues just yet. Detectives merely finished walking down one single route, while the scientific community alongside NY's relatives, much like those dedicated agents continually working to bring her home. And the reporter's ancestry experts and lab techs tracking these developments across every field remain vigilant. Should you hold any details regarding Nancy Guthrie vanishing, please dial 1-800-CALL-FBI or visit tips.fbi.gov. Your secrets stay completely hidden with zero identification needed. This woman raised children. She loved her grandkids. She remains a beloved community member, a loyal companion, and the driving force behind this relentless hunt. Our presentation relies entirely upon open-source journalism combined with officially confirmed remarks from identified individuals. Every single data point, spoken word, and scientific evaluation ties back to properly authenticated origins. Every person mentioned throughout this video retains their presumption of innocence until legally convicted. This project exists purely to educate and inform. If you hold clues regarding Nancy Guthrie vanishing, connect with agents at 1-800-CALL-FBI or check out tips.fbi.gov. In the quiet shadows of our own neighborhoods, a deeply unsettling truth lingers. Our most vulnerable loved ones are often the most exposed. The heartbreaking disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie isn't just another true crime mystery to consume, it is a blaring siren for every single one of us. We have been conditioned by television to believe that DNA and cutting-edge forensics will always save the day. But as this tragedy proves, science has its hard limits. When complicated genetic puzzles stump the brightest minds and technology hits a wall, what is left? We are. Predators don't just magically appear and vanish. They prep. They buy the gear. They stake out our streets. And inevitably, somebody somewhere notices something. True justice rarely begins in a sterile laboratory. It ignites when a community absolutely refuses to stay silent. Check on your elderly neighbors. Secure their sanctuaries as fiercely as you would your own. If you catch a whisper or see something out of place, make the call. Nancy Guthrie raised children, loved her grandkids, and deserved to feel profoundly safe in her own home. Her devastating story leaves us with one crucial, enduring lesson. Our ultimate protection isn't a security camera or a microscope, it's each other.